What happens when absolute power meets absolute madness? Imagine being ruled by a man who thought he was made of glass, or another who set fire to his own city just to watch it burn. These weren't characters from legend, they were real kings, and today, you're going to meet 5 of them. France, a kingdom already burdened by conflict, famine, and debt, was about to descend into chaos. And at the center of it all was a man who would be remembered not for glory, but for madness. Charles VI, King of France, was once hailed as a bright, capable young ruler. But everything changed after a mysterious breakdown during a military expedition. Without warning, he turned on his own guards in a violent frenzy. That was the beginning. Soon, Charles began to exhibit terrifying signs of delusion. He believed with all his heart that he was made of glass. He insisted that if anyone touched him, even by accident, he would shatter into 1,000 pieces. He had iron rods sewn into his royal garments to protect his fragile body. Servants were ordered to walk ahead of him, sweeping the way clear, so no one would come close. The court, once a place of pomp and ceremony, became a theater of paranoia, but the danger wasn't only in his mind. On multiple occasions, Charles lashed out in fear, mistaking allies for enemies. The nobles, unable to remove him, began ruling from behind the curtain. The king was no longer a leader. He was a symbol of instability. France suffered deeply under his reign. Civil war loomed, and through it all the king wandered his halls like a ghost, fragile, confused, and completely disconnected from the world around him. They called him Charles the Mad, but to those closest to him, he wasn't mad, he was broken. A man shattered from within, clinging to a crown he could no longer carry. In 37 AD, the Roman Empire was about to find out. This is the story of Caligula, an emperor who began as Rome's beloved golden boy and became history's most notorious tyrant. His reign lasted less than 4 years, but the horror he unleashed would echo through history forever. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, he earned the nickname Caligula, meaning little boots, as a child living among Roman soldiers on the Germanic frontier. The troops adored this tiny boy who marched alongside them in miniature military gear. By age 25, Caligula had inherited the throne of the world's greatest empire. Rome erupted in celebration. Finally, a young, charismatic emperor who understood the people, and he delivered on every promise. Freed political prisoners, handed out massive bonuses to citizens and soldiers, hosted spectacular gladiatorial games that lasted for weeks. For 8 glorious months, Rome basked in what seemed like a new golden age. Then everything changed. In October 37 AD, Caligula collapsed with a mysterious illness, high fever, delirium. For days, the empire held its breath as their emperor fought for his life. When he finally recovered, something fundamental had broken inside his mind. The warm, approachable leader vanished overnight. In his place stood a man who believed himself to be a living god. He ordered temples built in his honor across the empire. He'd have long conversations with the moon and host elaborate dinner parties for Jupiter, setting places for gods who never showed up. But divine delusions were just the beginning. Caligula's madness grew darker by the day. The Roman Senate became his personal playground of humiliation. He forced elderly senators to run alongside his chariot for miles in scorching heat. Some collapsed and died from exhaustion. Then came history's most absurd political appointment. Caligula's favorite horse, Incitatus, was made a priest and given a marble stable with ivory mangers. The emperor seriously considered making the animal a consul of Rome. One day, Caligula declared war on Neptune, god of the sea. He marched his legions to the ocean and ordered them to stab the waves with their swords, collecting seashells as spoils of victory. Elite Roman soldiers, conquerors of the known world, found themselves at war with the tide. But the absurd quickly became horrific. Daily executions became entertainment. Torture became sport. Caligula would interrupt his meals to watch prisoners die, forcing their families to attend and smile during the proceedings. Paranoia consumed him completely. Anyone could be an enemy. Any word could mean death. Rome, once proud and mighty, cowered under the shadow of its mad emperor. The end came from within. On January 24th, 41 AD, Caligula's own Praetorian guards, led by Cassius Chaerea, whom the emperor had repeatedly mocked and humiliated, cornered him in a palace corridor. 30 stab wounds ended the nightmare. Caligula died at just 28 years old, after ruling for 3 years and 10 months that felt like an eternity to his terrified subjects. Rome immediately tried to erase him from history. His statues were destroyed, his name chiseled off monuments, his memory condemned forever. But you cannot erase a legend, even a terrifying one. Caligula's story remains a chilling reminder that the line between civilization and chaos is thinner than we dare imagine. Was he truly insane, or simply drunk on absolute power? We may never know for certain. But one thing is clear: when madness wears a crown, an entire empire can tremble in fear. Some emperors are remembered for conquest, others for wisdom. Caligula is remembered as a warning of what happens when unlimited power meets an unlimited appetite for cruelty. In the frozen heart of 16th century Russia, a child was born who would become history's most terrifying ruler. His name was Ivan, but the world would know him by a different title, Ivan the Terrible. This is the story of how an orphaned boy became a monster and how absolute power transformed grief into unimaginable cruelty. Picture Moscow in 1533. 3-year-old Prince Ivan sits on a throne too big for his tiny body, surrounded by ruthless nobles hungry for power, his father dead. His mother, soon to be poisoned when Ivan was just 8 years old. While other children played with toys, Ivan watched executions. While they learned nursery rhymes, he witnessed torture. The palace corridors echoed with screams from the dungeons below, and young Ivan absorbed every betrayal, every act of violence, every lesson in cruelty. The nobles who were supposed to protect him instead brutalized him. They killed his pets for sport. They humiliated him in public. They turned a frightened child into something far more dangerous, a victim with unlimited power. At 16, Ivan was crowned the first Tsar of all Russia, no longer just a prince, but a god-appointed ruler with absolute authority over millions of souls. Initially, Ivan seemed destined for greatness. He modernized Russia's legal system, expanded the empire's borders, and crushed foreign enemies. The young Tsar appeared to be everything Russia needed: strong, intelligent, and visionary. But beneath the surface, paranoia was growing like a cancer. The turning point came in 1560, when Ivan's beloved wife, Anastasia, died suddenly. Many believed she was poisoned by jealous nobles. Ivan was devastated. For the first time in his life, someone had loved him unconditionally, and now she was gone. Grief consumed him, but worse than grief was the rage that followed. Ivan became convinced that the Boyars, Russia's powerful noble families, had murdered his wife. His sorrow transformed into an unquenchable thirst for revenge. The frightened child who once trembled in palace shadows had become something far more terrifying, a madman with absolute power. In 1565, Ivan created his personal army of terror, the oprichniki. These black-robed horsemen rode black horses and carried the severed heads of dogs on their saddles as symbols of their loyalty. They swept across Russia like death itself, answering only to the Tsar. No one was safe. Entire families were executed on suspicion of treason. Nobles were tortured in Ivan's presence while he watched with cold fascination. The oprichniki burned villages, destroyed monasteries, and slaughtered thousands of innocent people. The massacre of Novgorod in 1570 revealed the true depths of Ivan's madness. Convinced the city was plotting against him, he ordered its complete destruction. For 5 weeks, his forces tortured and killed. Priests were roasted alive. Children were thrown to wild dogs. The city's population was nearly wiped out. Ivan personally participated in the torture sessions. He had become addicted to violence, finding twisted pleasure in the suffering of others. But his greatest act of madness was yet to come. November 1581. In a heated argument with his eldest son and heir, also named Ivan, the Tsar's legendary temper exploded. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, he struck his son in the head with his iron-tipped staff. The young prince collapsed, blood pouring from his skull. As Ivan the Terrible watched his son dying, the full horror of what he had done crashed over him. He had killed his own heir, the future of Russia, with his bare hands. For 3 days, Ivan cradled his dying son, begging forgiveness, weeping like the broken child he had once been. But it was too late. The prince died, and with him died whatever remained of Ivan's sanity. Ivan the Terrible died in 1584, slumped over a chessboard, alone and haunted by the ghosts of his victims. His reign had lasted 51 years, longer than almost any ruler in Russian history. He left behind an empire expanded and a people traumatized, a legacy written in blood and fear that would echo through Russian history for centuries. Ivan the Terrible proved that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are not born, they are made. One betrayal, one tragedy, one moment of madness at a time. He was Rome's golden boy, poet, performer, prince of the empire. But behind the curtain of art and elegance, Nero played a darker tune, one soaked in blood, madness, and fire. Born into privilege, young Nero was the great-great-grandson of Augustus. But his rise wasn't fate, it was orchestrated. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, clawed her way through court politics, poisoning and marrying her way to power. She married the Emperor Claudius, then had him killed. At just 16, Nero became emperor. Rome expected a puppet, but puppets don't pull their own strings. Nero wanted to be loved, not as a ruler, but as an artist. He sang, acted, played the lyre. He forced nobles to attend his performances for hours. Anyone caught yawning could vanish by morning. Then came the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. Flames consumed the city for 6 days. As homes burned and citizens fled, rumors spread. Nero had started it. Some say he watched it burn from a palace rooftop, singing of the fall of Troy. Whether myth or truth, the damage was done. To deflect blame, Nero pointed his finger at a strange new group in Rome, the Christians. He had them hunted, crucified, and burned alive as human torches to light his gardens. From the city's ruins, Nero built a palace of gold, Domus Aurea, complete with rotating dining rooms and artificial lakes. While Rome wept, he dined in splendor. Paranoia took hold. Nero murdered his wife Octavia, then his mistress Poppaea, kicking her to death while she was pregnant. Even his own mother, Agrippina, the woman who made him emperor, was stabbed to death on his orders. By 68 AD, Rome had enough. Rebellions rose. The Senate declared him a public enemy. Nero fled the city he once ruled, hiding in a villa, clutching a dagger. "What an artist dies in me," he whispered, before ending his life with a borrowed hand. He was 30 years old, Nero. The emperor who dreamed of fame but left behind only flames. A ruler who set his world on fire just to watch it burn. He was born a king, but lived like a dreamer. While the world marched toward industry and war, he escaped into fantasy. Castles, swans, Wagnerian operas. But behind the fairy tale was a man slipping further and further into madness. This is the tragic tale of Ludwig II, Bavaria's moon king. Crowned at just 18, Ludwig had no interest in politics. He despised court meetings, avoided ministers, and rarely showed his face in Munich. Instead, he vanished into the mountains, into a world of myth and magic. His obsession? Art, music, fantasy. He poured his kingdom's wealth into building dreamlike palaces, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, each more extravagant than the last. Marble halls, golden fountains, ceilings painted with gods and legends, castles not made for people, but for a solitary soul lost in dreams. He idolized composer Richard Wagner, calling him a prophet. Ludwig gave him vast sums, built theaters in his honor, and saw himself as a mythical king straight from Wagner's operas. But Bavaria was running out of money. The people grew restless, ministers worried. Ludwig had stopped governing altogether. He slept all day, wandered his castles by night. Some claimed he spoke to imaginary friends, dined with ghostly kings, and demanded his servants never look him in the eye. In 1886, the government struck. They declared him mentally unfit to rule without a medical examination. A team of doctors signed off on it. Ludwig was arrested and sent to Lake Starnberg under guard. Just 1 day later, he went for a walk with his doctor. Hours passed. Then, a body was found floating in the lake. 2 bodies. Ludwig and the doctor. Official cause? Suicide. But the water was shallow. Ludwig was a strong swimmer, and the doctor had bruises on his neck. To this day, no one knows what really happened. Ludwig II, the king who built castles in the clouds but drowned in the world below. Was he mad or merely misunderstood? A tyrant or a dreamer lost in time?